Hey, good evening, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Current Events on Tap, a podcast brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Project, where, like the drinks, the current events are on the house. And I am your host, Alex Kirsch, pragmatic progressive, U.S. Army veteran, truck driver, gamer, and streamer. If this is your first time on the show, please do not forget to hit like, share, comment, and subscribe. We are currently streaming live on YouTube, Twitch, and the X platform, also known as Twitter. The format of the show is simple. I bring one or more guests onto the show. We talk beer or a beverage choice and current events of the week. Each person will discuss their beverage choice for this hour, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, it does not matter. Then each person will then cover two current events of their choosing. They give the current event, they give their assessment, an overall view of it, then each person gives a chance to give their assessment, then we essentially discuss. Debate may be possible, but rest assured, you are in a good faith zone, and you will get your chance to get your point across. The point of this space is for all of us to discuss the issue, what we think of it, and keep an open mind to what the other person has to say. But please remember, keep it within TOS. Without further ado, let's welcome our guest this evening, Counterpoints. What's going on, Counterpoints?
Hey, good evening. Happy to be here. Sorry I'm on my less good mic, but we're having some technical issues. No problems there. For those of you who are unfamiliar with me, for those of you at home, my name is Connor. I do run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints 40K. I break down the science fiction universe, Warhammer, and then also I like to do Twitch and YouTube political debates. It is a side hobby of mine and a passion of mine that I've had for at least a few years. So if you've seen me from either one of those ventures, then, awesome. And if you haven't seen me, then come aboard because we're fun. And I would say I'm more centrist-y, but obviously I have some center-left sympathies economically, and I would say I'm like Jordan Peterson socially. So that's kind of like a quick introduction for me.
Absolutely. I tell you what, every now and then, like when I need to pick Connor's brain as far as like doing Warhammer 40K, I was like, tell me about this. But he's got a lot of war on his YouTube channel. There's a lot of people out there that do Warhammer lore, but he does a great job with it. Like I watched some of the videos of like for some reason, I just have this thing where I like the Death Guard and Grandfather Nurgle. I don't know why. I just feel drawn to it.
No, they're honestly like they're so abhorrent to me, but that's part of the reason why I think they're attractive is because there's only a few factions that are actually having fun, and Nurgle is actually having fun because they're enjoying the decay and the entropy and bringing people into the fold and getting new cultists and recruits.
Yeah.
And also part of their thing is that once you join, you're no longer in pain. So you might be a rotting carcass with your guts spilling out of your body, but you won't feel it, so you won't care. So that's kind of Nurgle's whole deal. He's the god of decay.
Yeah, and it's just like the thing I've noticed is like most consistent thing that every content creator that talks about Warhammer all say the same thing is that Nurgle actually cares about those that follow him. Like he considers them a gift. And like,
he likes his creation. He likes life. He just wants life to decay so it breeds new life. So he's all about entropy and rot. And and he actually enjoys his followers, and some of his followers enjoy him, and they have a good relationship. As far as I can tell. Whereas Tzeentch is an asshole, Khorne's an asshole, Slaanesh is gonna, basically force you to do drugs until your brain fries inside your own skull, and also do other non-TOS safe things that are gonna, but until it's no longer fun. Like that's her whole deal is she'll make you do really pleasurable things until it's no longer fun. Whereas Nurgle just wants you to chill and spread the message. So it's kind of
it really is. And I play Dark Tyrant every now and then. I think it's fun. It still is every now and then just kind of jump in because I kind of have like the Left 4 Dead nostalgia kind of creeping in because like it's just hordes and hordes coming on in. But like I just like it just because I like playing the veteran for some reason, and I have my own version of the bolter, which I think is pretty awesome. I mean, it's like the low class bolter, but it's still, I have fun with it. But I'm just waiting for Space Marine 2 to come out. That game is going to be fucking mind-boggling.
So I was a huge fan of Darktide. I still have like a video essay in the back of my mind, but I want them to release Darktide 2 or an expansion pass or something like that so I can kind of ride the algorithm a little bit. But I think it's a love letter to mortal men in the Warhammer 40K universe because, you kill like 1,000 cultists per mission, but at the same time, if you wander away from your team for any amount of time, you get screwed instantly. And then also even when you're with your team. You'll get, swallowed by, a giant monster. You'll get taken down by a dog. You'll get swarmed by, cultists or or poxwalkers or whatever. So it really does make you feel in danger at all times, which I felt was like a really cool mechanic that they talked about in the promotional material. And then also, while doing that, it still made your weapons feel decently powerful and correct for the lore. So las guns are blasting off limbs, bolters are ripping people apart, twin heavy stubbers are just blasting entire, hordes of
Yep.
cultists. So yeah, so it's just a rip roaring good ass time. And I'm kind of sad that there was some technical issues in the beginning because I think that turned a healthy chunk of people off. But I had a newer computer, so I didn't have any technical issues. So I had a blast
Hmm.
since I installed it, probably for a solid 6 months. It was a great game.
Oh yeah. I used to have like because I used to have DSL and I used to have disconnection issues all the time. Ever since I got
Hmm.
Starlink, never had a problem. Like it's just
Nice.
yeah. The only time I ever had a problem was like an update and it's just like sorry we can't connect you at this time. The servers are down. That's the only time I ever had a problem with that. But I tell you what, I live out in the sticks. Starlink has been a godsend. That's why I'm able to do streams and stuff like that. So
I'm kind of excited because for that opportunity, Starlink kind of doing what it's doing because a lot of people in the city were like, man, we're so sick of everybody. We're rubbing elbows into each other. It's a pain in the ass getting anywhere. And obviously, like you love your local restaurants and you love your local community stuff. But after a while, you're just like, man, fuck it. Like, what if I went out into the sticks? Then as long as I had good internet, I could have a good time. So I mean, if that opportunity is opening, if that frontier is opening, I think that's going to be really good for the country, actually.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean it's fantastic. Like I have like a couple issues here and there, but you know what? Honestly, it's been the most consistent internet that's been like really good. So
Excellent. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I kind of forgot that this was a beverage show, but I still have the beverage that I would have had in mind. I can talk about it passionately. So,
yeah, go
so
ahead. By all means, you
the
go first.
Yeah, so the beverage I would have brought if I had remembered the wife to pick it up. I have young children, so I don't get to drink as much as I want to.
Mhm.
But it would have been Guinness, and the reason why it would have been Guinness is even though I think it's from Northern Ireland, it's not from Ireland. I'm of Irish stock. I'm of English stock. I seem to gravitate towards like stouts, lagers, porters. Darker the better, but a good lager in the middle is always solid. And then the reason why I like Guinness is because it has a shitload of calories. Now, people might typically be like, "Oh, that's bad," but for me, I feel like I ate a meal while I was drinking, and so the amount of hangovers that I've had with Guinness is almost zero. So, considering it's from my country of origin, disputably, it's heavy, it lets you catch a buzz. You don't feel hungover the next day, and you can do an Irish car bomb if you want. You can drop a shot of like Bailey's Irish Cream into a Guinness, and then chug that, and then get fucked up. Yeah, it's a phenomenal drink. So if you're Anglo or Celtic or Northern European, I would strongly recommend it. Giving it a try.
Funny enough that you said that because that was what I had last week was Guinness actually in honor of St. Patrick's
Nice.
Day because like there's two that I like a little bit more than Guinness. Have you ever had Murphy's?
No, but if it's a
It's
stout
yes.
or a porter, then I would probably fuck with it.
Yeah, it's really good. It's got like one of those like I don't know what it is. It's like a little cap on like on the inside. It's like some sort of oxidize or something like that on
Like
the inside.
CO2
Yep.
carbonator
It's
kind of thing. Yeah.
I tell you what though, it's got a really delicious flavor to it. Like it's Guinness is good. Like I like a
Mhm.
dark beer, don't get me wrong, but Murphy's is a little bit better than Guinness. But if I was to drink like an ale of some sort, Smithwick's is one of my go-tos, and that's also an Irish beer. It's so good. Like ever see Smith, it looks like it says Smithwick's. It's a red ale. It is so good. The first time I had it was in Sonoya, Georgia, and that's what they use for their fish and chips for their beer batter for the chips. It was so good. Oh god, it's delicious.
Well, that's the thing about Celts. Like the Italians, they could hold it down with wine or whatever, but then the Celts, they got into the beer and the whiskey and all that kind of stuff, and then probably affected our culture relatively negatively for a few hundred or a few thousand years. However, that doesn't mean that we didn't get good at it. So, so
Yeah,
just because
absolutely.
there's a bunch of alcoholic Irish people doesn't mean that we didn't get good at our alcoholism. There's skill and tier levels to alcoholism, and I would like to think the Irish have it, relatively speaking, maxed out.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely, I agree. I mean, it's just like I'm a beer. Let's see. Like before I went to Germany, I was more of a mixed drink kind of guy. You know, rum and coke stuff like that. When I got to Germany, I became a beer snob. That's why like I drink a lot of beer and I like to sample different kinds of beer. And if I see something that looks good, I'm like, let's try this out. But
Yeah,
yep.
I don't get jacked up much these days, so I try to
I get
keep it
it.
with the lower percentage alcohols. That way, the following day isn't as brutal.
And my beer of choice this evening is Victory Golden Monkey with a 9.5% alcohol percentage. It's a Belgian style triple ale with added spice. It's actually pretty good. It's not like
I would
overpowering.
actually say you got to be careful with those though,
Yep.
because you'll have like two or three because they taste decent, and then you'll be like, "Oh shit, I'm actually wasted."
Yeah, it'll do that to you. Like there's one like Dragon's Milk or whatever it is. I had like 3 or 4 of those, and it's like, oh god, I'm shit faced. But
Yeah, and then you like stand up and you're like, "Ooh, I'm a little bit more toasty than I thought I was." Yeah,
yeah,
oops.
exactly. But like I like to sample, but this one is actually not bad. You just got to be careful. You got to tread carefully because I've already had like 2 other beers before this one. But like
Nice.
the company, a Victory Brewing Company, is based out of Downingtown, Pennsylvania. So
Hmm.
um, I like to try different kinds of beers. Like I consider like Bud Light, Coors Light. I consider that a piss beer essentially. I don't really drink that
Yep.
too much unless I absolutely have to. Like I like different kinds of beers that you don't really see typically. You know.
Well, and even Guinness is like very corporate, very mass produced, very whatever. Whereas if you were going to be like, oh, hey Connor, what would you recommend I try? There actually is a decent. I'm in Central Florida. There's a decent craft brew scene down here. There's a local joint called Bowigan's. There's another joint that I forget, but it's something to do with hops. They incorporate it into the name, and it's very popular. There's Cigar City, which is out of Tampa. They're actually like a brand that has expanded at
Mhm.
least into the southeast. I think Fat Tire from New Belgium. I think New Belgium is manufactured in Georgia. So New Belgium is another, or at least it's
Yeah.
available in Georgia.
Yeah.
But New Belgium is another fantastic brand that has like they have the Ranger
Colorado.
IPAs, they have the Fat Tires.
Yep.
Yeah. So the beer connoisseurs, alcohol connoisseurs, there's a healthy scene down here.
Oh yeah.
That's what I would say.
Well, when I went to Florida one time, I went to the place called World of Beers. Yes.
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 Yeah.
I knew about that.
They play their music too loud for me.
Yeah.
There's a World of Beers that's by the University of Central Florida. This was before I met my wife, but basically they play the music at like a 10. So there's like literally dozens, maybe hundreds of
Yep.
young people that are all dressed to the tens and looking great, and they're ordering craft beer and they're having a good time and all that kind of stuff. But I realized like halfway through, it's like the entire time I'm just screaming at my friends and they're like 1 foot away. And I'm
Yep.
like, this is a horrible way to have a conversation. Does World of Beer just assume that nobody at UCF has anything of value to say, so they just blast the music so we don't have to hear each other's horrible conversation?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was kind of wondering that.
Yeah. No. No. 100%. Like that's why I usually like when it comes down to going to the bars stuff like that. It's just like it's so loud. It's so overpowering. Like I actually haven't been to a bar. Okay. Correction. Okay. Like a sports bar that doesn't really count. I'm talking about like a bar where people go to mingle or like going to a strip club. I haven't been to one since 2012. I don't feel like I'm missing much. That's even before I was married too. So
That is something that I've noticed. I kind of vibed with that, especially as I was kind of like aging out of the
yep.
partying scene or whatever. But I would recommend that to younger people if you're feeling like the scene isn't really for you. You don't like inhaling like tons of secondhand smoke. You don't like screaming at loose women for 3 or 4 hours at a time to see
Yep.
if you could take one of them home. There's different ways to spend your time and spend your money that are probably worth it, and I would recommend gravitating towards those things over time. You don't have to
Absolutely.
be you don't have to be 50 years old overnight, but also if you're sick of the party scene, you don't have to stay there forever.
Exactly. Absolutely. So hey, you ready to get into the topics?
Absolutely.
All right. So, first topic. So this week, the Biden administration has forgiven another $5.8 billion in student loan debt to 77,700 borrowers. The people that qualified this time are public service employees. For example, teachers, nurses, social workers, and firefighters. As of 2023, the number of Americans with total student loan debt is 43.2 million, or 13% of the U.S. population, with a grand total of 1.73 trillion, which has a higher GDP than some first world nations across the world. At one point, state funding did actually help significantly with students who had aspirations to attend a college or in a state could help assist the students with their tuition. Over the years, however, that has changed significantly. Now, experts have stated that, the average student pays 80% of their tuition. Now, this is not like out of pocket. This is like with student loans, essentially. And the state essentially will cover the rest of the on average. Now, the student takes out these student loans because they know if they want to get a degree, let's say business management, they want to go to the best business school or one of the best to get their education. They get promised the moon, and they will be able to pay back their student loans in good time. Now, let's do some maths right quick. Yes, I said maths because that was intentional. If someone takes out a $60,000 loan, a payment is supposed to range anywhere between $636 to over $5,000 a month. It really depends on the APR. You're good. Anyone who graduates from high school, however, they want to go to their dream school and will jump at the opportunity because they truly believe that they'll be covered throughout their time at college, and they'll automatically get a job in business in the real world without considering the following: the location, the cost of living, the average gas price, if the job is even hiring at the time, if they will get an apartment or have roommates to get a house, or are they going to have to move in with mom and dad? What will happen if they can't pay their debts? What are their options, etc.? And of course, then they find out that the payments they make monthly to pay off their student loans, only a small percentage per month goes towards the actual payments, like towards the actual debt itself. The rest of it goes towards interest. Now, to top it all off, when they make these payments in some states, if their payment is even off by a penny, the institution actually has a right to say, that doesn't count, you gotta pay it again, all that money you've paid into doesn't matter, you've lost it, you just gotta pay it again. Now, the simplest way for me to evaluate this, at the end of the day, this is how I view it. It's a scam. Student loan debt is a scam. Now, people should not have to pay student loan debts for more than 10 years because once they pay the required amount, maybe even a little bit interest, I'm willing to see a little bit of wiggle room, they should be off the hook. Now, considering the fact that tuition rates are continuing to climb and top tier universities are using that some of the money they get to get new recreational facilities, state-of-the-art pools, buildings for psychology, art, English, there is a problem within the system, I would have to say. Now, my wife, she had student loans. When I first met her, she had student loans because she went to college after she graduated from high school in 2000. Now, we were able to pay off the balance of her student loan in 2019. That was after my mom and I sold our house in Oregon. We had to use that balance to help pay that off. To me, this is insanity. I find that this criminal, the way the student debt system goes. So, Connor, go ahead and give me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so for me, this is where I kind of depart from Republicans. People question my bona fides or whatever, but at the end of the day, like philosophically, what I mean by Republican is I believe in a republic. I believe in representative democracy. I don't think that the mob should rule, et cetera, et cetera. And also, like, I think that in order to have a conservative society or in order to have a republic perpetuate itself, you have to have a healthy society. And I don't think that taking working class or middle class kids, putting them through a relatively broken public education system, or at least a flawed public education system, if we're being generous, and then asking them to take out a shitload of debt in order to get a certification that they might not even need for a vocation, in order to engage in a vocation where they need the cert in order to make a decent wage, but then the benefit of making that decent wage goes back to paying off their educational enterprise. To me, this feels like getting fleeced. That's what it feels like. America needs workers. It needs people who get into our private and public institutions and dedicate 40 to 60 hours a week of their lives in order to make that institution function properly. As a result, I think that we should be educating people up to that tier, not for free, but relatively speaking, it should be automatic. So whether I'm open to all sorts of solutions when it comes to this. I'm open to reducing the certifications required in order to get better jobs. I'm into incentivizing private institutions to hire people who don't necessarily have these degrees. I'm open to, but that's on the like privatized side. On the public side, I don't give a shit if the United States does some kind of like 2-year enrollment program where you work retail and restaurant, or you join the military, or you work for the post office. And after 2 years, we basically give you like a tuition free GI Bill kind of thing. And my argument would be that, like, and people are like, oh, well, that's just a lot of money and you're throwing it to all these, crooked people. And, why does a cashier at Walmart need to learn about Play Doh? I would like to live in a society where my cashier does know about Play-Doh. So for me, it's no skin off of my ass if the American public is educated. That doesn't bother me at fucking all.
Mhm.
So yeah, so good. Let's figure it out. Let's figure out how to eliminate red tape, get Americans educated, and get them the certs that they need in order to employ. And let's make sure that these certs are actually required. Because I'll tell you, I got a bachelor's degree just to get a bachelor's degree to open up some doors for myself. I haven't used that shit once.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When it comes down to like this whole topic, right? Like, and like I said, I feel like it's a scam because like people know, like I feel like younger people when they graduate high school, they're not properly educated in like this is what's expected of you essentially, and let alone the fact that they don't understand that there's like a lot of red tape or like there's like it's kind of like the fine print essentially. Yeah, you might pay this average, but this is how much is actually going to go into your student loans. I think like if they actually saw that. Like, why would I want to do that? But
well, even then, I'll tell you what happened with me. So I got the GI Bill. I got 4 years paid for, and I got the tuitions assistance, and I went to a public school, so it was like 80 or 100% covered, and whatever. But the living expense from the government, while helpful, it was enough to pay my rent. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I still had to work a full-time job in order to be able to eat, pay for my car, pay for gas, pay for cell phone, pay for whatever. And I didn't have my parents like, paying for me to go to college. That didn't happen. If anybody had to pay anything, it was me. Yeah. So basically I was totally reliant on myself. And then because I had to work 40 to 50 hours a week in order to make ends meet, because let's face it, at the time in the 2010s, wages were shit. So I was working entry-level jobs, making dog shit pay, working 50 hours a week, taking 12 to 15 credit hours. And then because I fell back on credit hours, a 4-year degree should take 4 years. It took me 5 because I took 12 instead of 15 because I had to in order to survive. So then even though I had the GI Bill, which was fantastic, I still had to take out student loans. So I still had, by the end of the education system, I still had 20 grand worth of student loans. So, it's that's what I'm saying is like, if I had every advantage in the world, which was being decently intelligent, having the GI Bill, pay my tuition, and being able to take out like those early loans for textbooks, and I had living assistance to help pay my rent, and I still ended up 20 grand in debt, that kind of speaks to how people are being fleeced through the education system.
Sure, absolutely. There was a video, and I share this every single time I have this conversation with people when it comes down to student loan debt or going to college. It's a video that Mark Cuban did years and years ago, and he was asked, he was like giving advice and stuff, and he was asked, what advice would you give a high schooler who's looking to go to college? He's like, for starters, go to the cheapest community college to get all your prerequisites out of the way. He's like, because you don't need to go to Harvard to get like intro to writing, intro to English, intro to... No, he's 100% right though. He's like, that way, whenever you want to... be careful. But anyway, like, you don't need to go to like the best college. Like, yeah, it might look better if your like degree says, hey, I got an associate's degree from Harvard University. But the thing is, if you go to an accredited school, it's the same degree. It's just, the only thing that's different is the name. I mean, I've got an associate's degree from the University of Maryland Global Campus. It's still just as good as any other college out there, essentially. It may not be as prestigious as some, but it's still the same kind of degree, right? Now, he was then asked, what advice would you give somebody that's like getting ready to go graduate from college? And let's say, for example, okay, let's say they follow that advice. They go to a community college. Then they go to the University of Michigan to be an attorney, right? Or to be an admin, accountant, right? And they said, what advice would you give somebody that's getting ready to graduate college? He said, try not to find the perfect job. Because that's why I bring up the fact that there's no guarantees when you graduate college that job is going to be open for you. For all you know, you're going to be going into a market where there's no openings. So you've got to find a job, essentially. You got to find something. And it might suck. You might graduate from college. You feel like, what am I doing with my life? I went to college for business administration, and here I am bagging groceries. But here's the reason why I think there's a benefit to that, because Mark Cuban even says, regardless of what job you do, you get paid to learn. Because what people don't realize is like whatever job you might be, whether it's vocational school or trade school, I mean, that's the same thing. But regardless of what school you might go to and whatever job you might find yourself in, you get paid to learn how to interact with people, what kind of social skills you have, because you're going to encounter thousands of people a day. And each day you learn something new about yourself, essentially. You learn something new about your boss. You learn something about like adversity. I mean, granted, it must not be that hard to do it, but when you're standing for hours on end, it takes a toll on your body, essentially. But that's why it's so important, because just because you might have a degree in this doesn't mean you're going to get this job right away because you got the degree in it. Sometimes you actually have to find the job that doesn't fit your field because you have to learn how to cope with that afterward. I mean, that's just, I think that's the best advice you can give somebody.
Yeah, if you're so interesting. A couple of minutes ago, you hit a point, and then it still relates to what I'm going to say. So what I would say is, don't worry. If I was giving advice to young people, don't worry about anybody else, right? You're going to see movies about Mark Zuckerberg going to Harvard, and he's dealing with these rich dickhole kids, and they're going to these sweet parties where everybody's doing cocaine and they're dressed fancy, and Mark's autistic, so he makes $1 billion by tricking rich kids into subsidizing his business. You're going to see party school movies where these kids they never actually go to class. All they're doing is banging hot chicks and drinking alcohol. Don't worry about all that shit. All that shit, it's media, it's movies. And it's like, are you going to have fun in college? Yeah, absolutely. You're going to meet other young people. They're also going to be just getting started with their lives. They're probably going to be interested in doing some kind of recreational drugs. And you'll be able to hang out and philosophize about the world and do chemical substances and talk about life and philosophy and what are you doing and what am I doing and all that kind of stuff. And maybe a cute girl will, touch you downstairs. So, it happens, right? But that's not all of it. And you can't compare your experiences to these fictionalized, idealized versions of the world. And then not only if you're a rich kid who can stay, your parents are paying for your college, so you can stay in the dorm, you can graduate without debt, you have friends who are already in industry, you can rub elbows with the right people and then get into the right job, go do that. Because the truth is, you're lucky, you're privileged, take advantage of it. Don't fucking worry about the working class schlubs. However, if you're a working class schlub like me, then guess what? Your fate in life is eating a shit sandwich every single day that you wake up. And the best way to do that is to wake up, eat your shit sandwich, try to figure out how to do it in the most efficient and effective way possible so you become a valuable employee to people, and then become the best shit eater that anybody's ever fucking seen. Because then people will be turning left, right, and center trying to give you a job because they're like, oh my God, I've seen that you've eaten 20 shit sandwiches in one day. How can I possibly employ you? And that's where I am right now, where I actually have 2 or 3 people being like, wow, you eat that shit really good. Here's money. And I'm like, no. I'm actually trying to go do my own thing right now. And so that's the dream, right? The dream eventually, it's not going to be everybody's dream to be your own boss, but you need to have some kind of dream where you're eating the least amount of shit sandwiches possible, or you're eating them super effectively and you're paid really well, or you're your own boss. And you got to figure all that stuff out in the next 10 to 20 years. You got to figure it out.
Oh, absolutely. Because,
so you don't kill yourself.
Absolutely. Good philosophy. The thing was when I was getting ready to retire, I did not know what I wanted to do. I was still thinking I was just going to go to college and everything was going to be hunky dory. But, I just I need to take advantage of this career skills program. And of all the things I picked truck driver. And, for the first 6 months when I was retired, I actually was OTR, over the road. I was gone a month and a half at a time. And I can tell you what, I can speak from experience, it is hard being a truck driver. It's tough being away from home so much. And then after that, I worked with a different company and I was home every weekend. Now I'm with a company where I'm home every single day. It's trials and tribulations. And I'm telling you, it's not easy doing things.
And you ate a shit sandwich. You got good at eating the shit sandwich. Somebody else said, wow, I like the way that you eat this shit sandwich. Come eat this shit sandwich. That one was a little bit smaller. And then finally somebody was like, hey, this is a shit sandwich that you might enjoy. And you're like, oh, this one's okay.
it's
I'm
true
just,
though. No, it's true
yeah.
though because I'm 41 years old, right? I don't want to keep
Mhm.
like working this hard, but fortunately, because of where I work at, I like what I do. Like I feel
Yeah.
very fulfilled when I do it. Does it suck sometimes? Yes. Like there are times where like I have to haul like patio doors that are heavy as fuck, but I still got to move them because I'm basically putting this into somebody. No, I'm delivering this so it can get put into somebody's home, right? And I get
Mhm.
fulfilled satisfaction from it. But it's just this is my whole entire point. It's just like what people don't realize is like I feel like everybody in society, regardless of if they have a degree or not, they have some sort of a purpose. Even the person you go through the McDonald's drive-through, they're still fulfilling some level of purpose, and I feel like some people don't understand that. Now,
The
yep, yep,
Yeah, sorry, if I could interject real quick. One of the things that I think was when I was younger, I think just because of the way popular media is, it's one of two things, right? It's sex or death. It's either, how do you get drunk and, talk to young women, or it's how do you get into a gunfight and win the gunfight, right? That's like
sure,
every movie ever. What was interesting though, and I think a lot of people take this for granted that they just kind of assume that there's like a broader and bigger world. I didn't because I was naive.
yeah,
So of course I did the military, I did law enforcement, I got my 4-year degree, I did all the craziest stuff that I could do. But I got to say, there's something very rewarding about being a part of the constructive side of society. So I do construction administration now. It's not the thing that I'm most passionate about, but basically what I do is I used to review estimates from the adjuster side, make sure that everything was in line, make sure that the contractor wasn't fleecing the insurance company, and then I would take a snow shovel and I would throw tens of thousands of dollars at people who needed it. It was not the worst job in the world. It was just very difficult. Now I'm on the construction administration side where basically it's my job to create something that an adjuster will approve in order to make sure that we get snow shovels of money thrown at us so we can repair people's houses. And there is something kind of like beautiful and wholesome about that because we're not talking about blood and guts, people getting murdered. We're not talking about the most extreme shit on the planet. We're talking about like the small incremental steps that make society actually function on a day-to-day basis. And it might not be as sexy as like the younger, crazier shit that we used to do, but it feels incremental, wholesome, positive, healthy, and helps the world. And so when you're 19, you might not be into that, but as you get older, you start to look for those moments more and more.
absolutely. Because like one of my favorite topics actually, and like the very first time the first episode I did was with Tiberius. And then
Mm,
one of the topics we talked about was infrastructure. Infrastructure is one of my most passionate topics because I deal with it all the time. And like
yeah.
if the roads are shit, it affects my job essentially. That's why I'm so passionate about it because like when I worked for one company, JB Hunt, I would drive to like some of the seediest parts of Detroit, and I would see like how run down it is essentially. And it's just
Yeah.
because like how far behind everything really is. And I would see like for example, I made a delivery to a place one time, and I asked to use the bathroom, and the bathroom looked like a dungeon. It did not look functional. But I'm like, but it's just like
Like this is the beginning of a horror movie.
it really is, honestly. But the thing is, like,
Yeah.
if this is screwed up, what else is screwed up around here, right? And I and
Yeah.
I and I try to think about like if the opportunity is there, if something is better, if you can create a better environment, you're going to create a more cohesive and better environment for everybody, essentially. And I'm a firm believer in that. That's why, like, if the roads are in better condition, everyone's going to get to work on time. There's not going to be any issues. Like, I'm very, very passionate about this, and like that's why, like, you
But
hit the nail on the head.
it's harder and it's not as sexy and it's incremental and it's a pain in the ass. And so, but that's why I think it borderline makes it more important. So right now, I'm in my mid 30s, but I'm about to be in my late 30s. And so I'm relatively speaking halfway to a third, right? I'm a third through my life. If we're being optimistic, realistically, I'm halfway through my life.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to think about like what is the world that I'm going to leave behind for my children, because they're going to have to come up, they're going to have to become my age, they're going to have to deal with the infrastructure and the legacy that we leave behind, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you see this amount of disrepair and falling apart and collapsing, particularly of the Rust Belt. I was just in Cincinnati. I've been other places in the Rust Belt. I've been other places in the Northeast that are totally falling apart. It's like, what can we do to make sure that, like, human and American in particular, like civilization continues to thrive? And right now, I feel like we're kind of in the collapsing vision of what was built in the 40s and 50s. And we need like a renaissance. We need like a new vision of what the United States could and should be. And then we need to build the infrastructure that will actually accommodate that vision. And that will involve new roads, obviously, but it should also involve new urban design. It should involve revitalizing collapsed cities. It should involve a whole host of different things that will actually make America function better.
Absolutely. And like a lot of this stuff like this, some of this stuff actually does involve like having a degree of some sort. And a lot of this stuff, but you don't need a degree to be a truck driver. But the fact of the matter is like you still need, like, everybody has a purpose. Like without truck drivers, material doesn't get delivered. Without the engineer, without the construction worker and the contractor and the business person to run the contracts, this stuff doesn't get built. It's like everything is tied together. And this is what people need to understand. Is like we are all connected in some way, shape, or form. But it's just like when you're 23 years old, you don't give a shit about these things. You're more concerned about the fact it's like, that girl over there, I think she likes me. You don't have life figured out when you're 23 years old. I barely had life figured out when I was 30, for crying out loud. I mean, it's like, I'm a realist. Like, when you're young, I think people need to be young. Yes, you need to plan ahead. But be young, have fun, have a great
Enjoy
time.
it.
Absolutely.
It goes by really fast.
It really does, because before you know it, the most excited thing you're going to be, like, especially when you're married, is like, holy shit, I just bought a new dishwasher, and this thing is fucking amazing. Like,
yeah, like the old one wasn't cleaning that well. This one's actually cleaning the dishes well. This is fantastic. It's funny you said that. We did a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
No, but like, yeah, so the it does become about the maintenance and the perpetuation of like a better world. And so like you can do the small things, and like I do love the small things, and I do them all the time, taking care of the kids and painting the house and getting new appliances and all that kind of stuff. Those are all like the small things that I can do within my own life. But I think you also, at least if you're politically minded, you look out into the world and then you kind of wonder, it's like, why aren't these leaders taking steps in order to forward like the productive project of human civilization? And the truth is, one, it's probably overwhelmingly massive. And then two, it's probably insanely difficult. Where if you're talking about from like a political perspective, getting the funding passed in order to go to this distribution administration, in order to be spread amongst these private businesses, in order to revitalize this part of the town or this part of the infrastructure or whatever, and then making sure that this project actually gets done somewhat, relatively speaking, within budget and actually makes the infrastructure improvements that you were looking for originally. These are all like really complex things, and they take tons of mental horsepower, and oftentimes we elect people who just say the funniest and shiniest and catchiest things, and we don't actually elect the technocrats that would be really passionate about civic infrastructure. So so democracy kind of sucks in a way. I'm of the opinion that what Winston Churchill said, which is like, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the other ones. And that's kind of my opinion.
That does sound familiar, honestly. It's like from the TV show The Orville. It's like, yeah, democracy is pretty bad, but it's been better than the alternatives, honestly.
And that's, dude, and that's literally it. Is like, everything fucking sucks, but oftentimes, especially with kids, and I say kids, but I really mean like 15 to 30-year-olds. It feels like the extremist politics people, they're like, well, we're going to get this person who has the right ideology into power, and then everything's going to be right. And it's like, no, because that person, let's say that we elected like Stalin or like Nick Fuentes to be like emperor tomorrow. They would, could you imagine like a bill coming across their desk that's like, and by the way, this would happen even in an authoritarian society, where they're like, Detroit's pipes are falling apart. This community doesn't have water. We need to send in engineers in order to gut the pipe system and rebuild it from scratch. And it's going to cost an insane amount of money because we have to gut existing infrastructure. That's not fun. That's not sexy. That's not interesting. That's not lining up your political enemies and shooting them. It's not any of that crap. It's the actual doldrums of governance. So, yeah. So just because you elect Stalin or elect Nick Fuentes doesn't mean that all the world's problems get solved.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Was there anything else you wanted to kind of weigh in as far as like the student debt, or did you want to move into your first topic?
No, I'm good. My first topic, I didn't like write them down or send them to you, but I do have them off the top of my head.
Go for it.
My first topic was Candace Owens, the
Okay.
famous black female political pundit who worked for the Daily Wire and used to work for Charlie Kirk. She got dismissed. Her contract wasn't renewed with the Daily Wire. She's been pretty spicy on Israel recently. And some libertarians and Republicans and conservatives were crying foul because they said that this was cancel culture, that Daily Wire did not renew her contract, even though she was being a total fucking asshole to her boss in public. I did not agree that that Ben Shapiro is morally compelled to work with somebody whose views he finds disgusting. So yeah, what's your vibes on Miss Candace Owens and her recent dismissal from Daily Wire?
Honestly, I'm not a fan of Candace Owens. The daily, I am a firm believer, like in the private sector. If you feel like this person is just like, if this person is dead weight, the best way you can do is just cut them loose. I think this was like, she accused a guy of being a Jewish satanic pedophile, essentially. So I knew that was going to be like her death sentence. Essentially, that was like the nail in the coffin. It probably that was all the excuse they needed for this. Do I think it was the right move? I don't know. I don't watch the Daily Wire. I don't subscribe to it really. I'm not a fan of Ben Shapiro. I did like his take on the Dune Part 1 and Part 2 movie, though. He was 100% accurate about that. But, like, I don't know. It's just like, I look at Candace Owens as people like her because, you know, they look at her as like one of the good ones. Yeah, well, some people like her because they look at her as like one of the good ones, essentially, if you know what I mean. Like she's
but she doesn't have any actual sincere philosophical backing. Like that's my absolute total frustration with it. Is that like if she was actually philosophically grounded and could articulate why she genuinely and earnestly believes in conservatism and conservative principles and all that kind of stuff, I would have a totally different opinion. Where even if I didn't agree, I would at least respect like a earnest black female conservative philosopher duking it out in the marketplace of ideas. I could respect that. But it literally seems like she has no backing for any of her beliefs, and she's like a dog chasing cars. Like what's popular with what's pissing off conservatives right now, and she'll figure out the most popular talking points, she'll regurgitate them, and God forbid she's challenged on them for any amount of time, she'll fall apart like wet fucking tissue paper.
Yeah, it's the thing is, like, and I've learned this lesson myself, if you can't defend your positions, it's really, really, you make yourself look stupid, honestly. I've fallen victim to that as well. I've learned from my mistakes. But the thing is, like, I think my biggest problem with her is this, like, she's so used to the rhetoric that you cannot back her off of these things. And I think that's the thing. It's like, if she doesn't know anything about the issue or something like that, she'll say it's stupid, but she won't explain why. Like, I remember when she was on Joe Rogan years ago, and he brought up climate change, and she says, "Are you concerned about it?" And she's like, "Not at all." And he completely held her feet to the fire, and she did not like that at all. She got very, very uncomfortable because, like, she was challenged, and she didn't understand the topics itself. Now, there are times, like, I see people challenge her. They might think that they have her, but she's a little bit more versed in her rhetoric, essentially, where she can actually fight back. But the second that you get somebody that's actually smarter than her, I mean, I don't hate her because of her points of view. Okay, a little bit this way. Okay, I don't hate her because like she leans a certain way. I just don't like the way she comes across. Let's put it that way. I think she's very arrogant in a way, but she can't defend her positions. That's my problem with her. She can't defend her positions to the highest extent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so that's my, I'm similar to you in the fact that like, I feel like you need some philosophical consistency in order to like back your perspective. You actually need to have your ideas rooted, or else you're just a sophist, basically. That's what that's what I think Socrates called people in Greece who they were more worried about rhetoric in convincing other people to see the world their way for their momentary advantage than they were interested in what was true so they could advocate towards like a specific goal based off of the truth. And so sophistry is like for me it's like worrying more about rhetoric than you are about the truth and where you're going and all that kind of stuff. So for me, she's a fucking sophist. She falls apart under the slightest bit of pressure and scrutiny. But what I really didn't like was they were saying that it was cancel culture to not renew her contract. I thought that was the stupidest shit in the world. Because when I think of cancel culture, I think of people like they're going out of the way to screw you, to defame you, to ruin your professional relationships, to, basically ruin your personal relationships, all that kind of stuff. And what Daily Wire, as far as I can see on the internet, I haven't seen any public statements from Ben Shapiro saying, fuck this lady, she's unemployed, a piece of shit. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen the Daily Wire do that. They literally just said we're not renewing the contract, which for me it's like good. Fuck her. Like I can't believe that you were. No offense to anybody in that camp, but I can't believe that you were so fucking stupid to fire or hire her in the fucking first place. It was clear she didn't know what the fuck she was talking about when she was working with Charlie Kirk.
Well, and here's the thing: like when people say, "Oh, it's cancel culture for like not renewing contracts," so take it a little bit step into history. Like, you remember the show Opie and Anthony on radio?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when Anthony left, it was just Opie and Jim Norton. And Opie, actually, they failed to renew his contract because he was harassing other people, and he was kind of being like, he was openly admitting that like he videotaped a guy while he was like taking a shit or something like that. So they decided not to renew his contract, essentially. That's fair. And like, if they feel like this person's dead weight, if this person's going to ruin our platform, there's no point in renewing their contract, because if we fire them, then we're going to have to owe them basically money. So the fact that Daily Wire says, listen, we're going to let you finish out your contract. We're not going to fire you, but we're not going to renew your contract. That's a different story. If they fired her like right off the bat and, like you said, like started trashing then yeah, you could have an argument as far as cancel culture, but it's just,
well, and what are the limits of bad behavior that you have to tolerate in order to not cancel someone? So you kind of brought up like videotaping somebody taking a it was kind of like I don't know, like a bro-y frat house vibe or whatever. I could see how somebody, especially if they were like Gen X or older millennial, I could see how they would see that as like a prank, not like sexual harassment or whatever. And I could see how like over time, like culture changing, basically you could deem that as, some level of like quote unquote cancel culture, unless they left like the door open where they're like, hey, we wish him the best in his future endeavors, et cetera, et cetera. We just decided not to renew because of XYZ, all that kind of shit. So for me, like, Candace has done some of the most fucked up shit like imaginable to me if I was like a Zionist Jew, right? I'm not a Zionist Jew. I'm a fucking, I'm a Celtic normie American, right?
sure.
But if I saw somebody who was being contrarian about October 7th and like Israel's response, which you can absolutely have criticisms of, but if you saw them kind of like comparing Jews or Israel to like Hitler and all that kind of shit, then I would be like, okay, yeah, fuck you. Like, you're not on my team. So I want nothing to fucking do with you.
Yeah. It's fair because like last week I actually had the guest I had on was Kay Fellows. We actually had a discussion about like Israel's response to Palestine. I mean, and we both made it abundantly clear that we don't hate Israeli people. We just feel like the response of the government and the IDF has just been like a little fucked up, honestly. But it's just like, that's different. Like we're able to draw like, there's certain things we're not going to say. And I feel like there are times where Candace is like, you're kind of fucking, you're going on touching ground essentially. But it's just, that's not even like some of the worst things she said or like the most demonstrably false things that she said. I think she was one of the people that said, the NRA was formed, what was it called, to teach black people how to defend themselves from slave owners. Like, I was like, that's not true at all. Like, you can actually go on the NRA website and show that that's not, it was created because the Union soldiers were shown to have shitty marksmanship skills, and that's why they formed the NRA, to teach soldiers how to have better marksmanship. Yep. Yeah. But like, it's just like, when people make false statements like that, it's like, why do people listen to this shit? I mean, because now people spread it like wildfire. It's like, well, this is Candace Owens. She would never lie to us, would she? Yes, the fuck she would.
Yeah, but see, that's my thing is like when you're propagandist, right? So who is it? Hassan Piker, like he went on to the news or whatever, and he was like, yeah, I'm a propagandist. It's like, bro, like, that's where, for me, especially when I see repetitious behavior of like fucked up behavior where you don't care about what the truth is anymore, that's where I kind of fucking lose it. Where I'm just like, you're not worth my consideration or appreciation or respect. Is if you know what the truth is and you don't care and you continue to basically push the narrative that your audience wants no matter what, then fuck you. You're making the world objectively a worse place.
Oh, 100%. And like that's why like when people say, "Oh, well, let's look at this first from Prague Review," I'm just gonna look like you're a fucking idiot, honestly, because like I don't consider Prague Review a legitimate source. Like if people say if say, "Oh, well, CNN not legitimate," okay, I'll grant you that. Okay, that's why I try to
Yeah.
be like, if I have like one source, I try to find like other sources that actually say, "Okay, this sounds a little bit accurate," essentially. But like a source like Candace Owens, I can't go that route. I'm sorry. It's just like that's why like there are certain content creators out there. Like I just don't take their word. I go with the whole trust but verify essentially because that's more important to
Oh yeah,
me.
because everybody's so full of shit. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
There's
100%.
few people. There's few people that I trust, and even amongst the people that I do trust, I take what they say with a grain of salt. So, for instance, I would say that Sitch and Adam. Not sure if you're familiar with them, but they're kind of like centrist creators or whatever. I would say that I have seen them be earnest in their beliefs, but biased towards their kind of like their framing, right?
Mhm.
And then same thing with Destiny, where I would say that very often he tells the truth. He uses facts in his arguments and all that kind of stuff. But I have seen him get so preoccupied with arguing and winning the argument that the argument becomes more than like the underlying facts of the scenario. So it becomes more about the rhetoric than it does the actual facts on the ground, so to speak. So this is kind of where, yeah, like even people I trust to be truthful and earnest, I still take what they say with a grain of salt because I think everybody is not only capable of bias, but also will aggressively fight for their bias almost no matter what. And I include myself in that camp as well.
Oh, sure, absolutely. I tell people all the time, if I'm wrong, go ahead and prove me wrong, and I'm willing to bite the bullet and say, you know what, I fucked up. I'm wrong. I admit this, but it's just like, and I've seen a few panels, honestly, where some people are just so dishonest, and you're like, just like you want to want to reach through the computer because like they're just so dishonest, it drives you nuts. You're like I've seen you like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? Seriously.
Oh, I've had blood pressure spikes that I thought might actually result in a cardiovascular incident. And I've had heartburn and nerve pain, flare ups that I thought were like catastrophic health issues that were going to take me out on a panel just because somebody pissed me off so bad. So far, though, I haven't died. So or suffered actual horrific physical injury as a result of Twitch and YouTube politics. But that
Yeah, absolutely.
there's still time.
Oh yeah. It was like with Candace Owens, I don't even know if I could actually like. I'd be willing to sit down and have a conversation with her, but it's just
Uh,
I remember like one conversation she had with Blair White, and Blair
mm.
White was like,
Oh, that was
Candace.
so rude.
Yeah,
Holy shit. Where she's like, sir,
yep,
sir, or like whatever she was doing. She was just doing whatever she could in her
yep,
way to fucking man to her face. Like, no justification, no hostility, no nothing. Dave Rubin sitting in the middle of them being
yep.
like, girls, 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 girls.
Yep. Yeah, and Blair's like Candace, calm down, and like,
Yeah.
but like that's the thing is, it's like
Calm down. You're being a real bitch right now.
exactly, but like I'm a firm believer. Like, if you and I can have a rational discussion, I can keep
Yeah.
professional. But like now, I'm of the mentality like the second that you start getting personal, okay, it's on like fucking Donkey Kong now. Like I'm
Yeah.
just gonna lay into somebody.
Well, actually, this is something that you might appreciate. So,
Sure.
you said that you retired from the military, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So for me, I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, where oftentimes the philosophy was shut up and do as you're told.
Yeah.
I spent 4 years in law enforcement, which was even if a member of the public is being an absolutely disgusting freak monster, you should have limits to the amount of shit that you will talk to a member of the public because it's unprofessional, it's
Sure.
uncouth, it's bad for the job, et cetera, et cetera. To talk smack to members of the public. So I spent almost a decade biting my tongue. And so people didn't realize, they're like, aren't you a former cop? Aren't you a former Marine? Aren't you supposed to know better than to like mouth off to people? And you're like, no, guys, I've been waiting 10 years to mouth off.
Yeah.
Like,
No, you're right. Oh my God, you are so correct. Because, like, so my wife, she spent time in the military as well. And now she works for the government again. And she's like, well, if you don't want to, like, work these hard jobs anymore, you can work for... I was like, I am not getting in a government job ever again because I've been waiting 20 years for me to be able to be this hostile towards people.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, like, that's why, like, I can freak... Like, I have my I love me while behind me, but I'm a veteran. I'm a retiree. I can say whatever the hell I want to right now. But
and that's the thing. It's like I never really had the opportunity to say that to these people, but I was thinking about it after the fact, where they were like, "Weren't you a former cop? I can't believe you're this aggressive and hostile. I can't, you were probably so aggressive and hostile at work." And I was like, "No, no, I wasn't. I was the nicest police officer on the force. And the reason why I'm being an absolute asshole to you right now is because there was like 10,000 people that I wish I could have told to go fuck themselves. Exactly. And I wasn't able to. I had to sit there, bite my tongue, and feel my blood pressure spike. So so you'll be the person that I tell to go fuck off.
No, 100%. Like, I get told, I mean, I don't want to deviate too much from the subject, but like, I get people telling me, like, you are a soldier. Shouldn't you be a little more professional? Like, fuck no, okay? You don't know me very well, okay? Like.
Well, and not just that, but like, let's just say that deployed soldiers who actually do real work or whatever, vulgarity is oftentimes
it's
like
a way of life. It's a way
of life.
And
like smoking cigarettes and talking shit is the way that the people who do the hardest jobs function.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I just want to kind of like, get back to the call. I'm sorry. But like, I don't know. I do think like Candace Owens is gonna be okay. She's gonna take this, and she's gonna take full advantage of the opportunity. She
could be a YouTube millionaire in a matter of months if she wanted to. If she wanted to make $10,000 or $20,000 a month, all she has to do is click the go live button. Get a few people to write stuff for her, like prepare an outline, and then take super chats and talk shit. And she doesn't even have to debate anybody. She could run her own show and probably make 10 or 20 grand a month.
Yep, absolutely. It's just like with Tucker Carlson, right? Tucker Carlson, after he got let go from Fox News, the dude went on Elon Musk's platform, and the dude's been fucking killing it. I don't like Tucker Carlson, but I can't deny the fact that he's made a shit ton of money off of just his name alone. Candace Owens is going to be fine. She'll be cool.
Yeah.
She's not worried about being let go from the Daily Wire. She is going to do her thing, and she is going to love it, honestly. Now she's like, she even said, I am free. I am no longer restricted. So this is not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I can't wait for her to have her Kanye moments. It's going to be great.
Oh.
So, all right. So we've been yapping for a bit, but I think that was my first topic?
Yes, that was your first topic.
Yeah. So that means that you have another topic and I have another topic, allegedly, before we.
Oh. Yeah.
So let's move, because I know you were saying that you normally do these for an hour, and we're already hitting an hour.
Right. Yeah. They go hour, sometimes 2 hours. So I'll try not to But anyway, so the next topic is more of your wheelhouse more than mine. Okay. So the Nashville Police Department recently made changes to standards to increase the number of females in their department. Okay. It has overall end game of increasing its capacity of women in their police force by 30% by 2030. However, the National Police Department is going to lower its standards, shall we say lower its standards, I say in quotations. What was once known as the Cooper Standards Test, I don't know if that you had that when you were a police officer. They measure push-ups, sit-ups, a 300-meter sprint, and a 1.5 mile run to test a cadet's fitness and stabilities. In 2021, however, the police chief, John Drake, decided to drop the Cooper's Standards Test to the Physical Agility Test, which now has a 99-yard agility run, a rescue simulation, which is a dummy drag, a chain link fence climb, and a solid wall climb in a 500-yard run. Now, the Cooper test between 2019 and 2021 in the Nashville Police Department had a total of 1,138 recruits. They tried joining, but 72 failed, a total of 6%. Now, with the new test, they had 967 recruits apply, and only 22 failed, which is a total of 2%. Now, this has resulted in an increase of their female force already. However, They have also added lactation rooms for nursing moms, and they are also even trying to have like a childcare facility, essentially, right? Because childcare is really expensive, so they're trying to have like a childcare facility. That way, like mothers can bring their children in, and they're gonna be taken care of, and then just pick them up after the shift, right? Now, all these efforts are to bring more women into the police force. However, it's had some mixed reactions from people, whether it's on the left or the right. Now, some people still believe women should be allowed on the police force, let alone the U.S. military. They make excuses like women are emotional, women cannot be rational, they aren't as strong as men.
True.
Now, now biology proves that men are stronger than women, but there are exceptions, right? I, however, seen females that are just as capable of doing the job as men are, right? Now, do I think the standards need to be lowered to accommodate them? Personally, no. Now, the Army used to have the APFT, which is the 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run, or a 2.5-mile walk. Now it has the ACFT, which has events like the medicine ball toss, the sprint, drag, and carry, weird push-ups where you kind of push down, extend your arms out, then push yourself back up, and then another 2-mile run, and then a max deadlift, and the plank. Now, that's not in order. Now, they have 3 different categories depending on the people's military occupational specialty. For example, if you're an infantry soldier, your standards might be a bit higher than somebody that's like working in an administrative, essentially. Now, do I think that was a good move? I do, actually. Now, some of these events are related to what you may or may not do in a combat environment, but like, for example, the sprint, drag, and carry, you never know. You might actually have to pick somebody up in a combat environment. You have to be able to do stuff like that, right? In a real situation, which is, I'm glad they do stuff like this because you never know. You might actually do it. Like, you might be on a base and you take incoming. Oh my God, I got to carry this guy to the nearest safe location, which I'm glad that they do stuff like this. But like, in closing about this, I've never been a police officer. I do, however, expect the police not just to be physically fit, but I expect them to be competent, essentially. Now, some cops are great at de-escalation. Some are horrible. Some cops cannot take on one drunk person by themselves. Some people can. Now, if they're doing this for just to be accommodating for the wrong reasons, I'm going to wonder if it's worth it. Now, you were a police officer, as you mentioned, and I would really love to hear your input on this.
Yeah, so when it comes to like females in law enforcement, a lot of people talk shit. I actually worked in a law enforcement department where I would say maybe 20%, 25% were female. And it was kind of viewed as like a fairly progressive department just because like, we try to take care of our people and train them to a higher standard, et cetera, et cetera. And we didn't have as much as that like good old boy shit. And what I would say is that the females, like there are stereotypes for a reason. And then there are people who shatter those stereotypes, and you have to like evaluate those on an individual basis. And then not just that, but females actually do offer, I would say, emotional and stereotypical skills that are valuable to law enforcement. So what I mean by that is there's a female law enforcement officer who works where I used to work, and she was a fitness freak. So she does CrossFit. She has a canine. She can keep up with her canine by running. If she got into a scrap, I wouldn't have a problem with it. And she's a decent marksman, so I think she could fight. So you might see a female, but she's actually more physically fit and physically capable than I would say 30% of the male cops, just because she actually takes her fitness and defensive tactics and firearms very seriously. So while she might start at a lower plane, she ends up exceeding like the bottom 30% of law enforcement officers easily. Like any day of the week, I would take her over half of the cops that I worked with. So don't judge a book by its cover just because they're female. Two, there's or subsection B or whatever we're on. There were also females who, when you have a older, more maternal person, somebody who has kids or they're older, so they just kind of have that like maternal aura about them, there will be bad guys or criminals who will respond to being chastised by a maternal woman differently than they will be by a man. So if you're being chastised by a man, being corrected by a male police officer, they might see that as a like a confrontation to their like honor or sense of bravado, and so they'll be more likely to throw down, get combative, start a fist fight, all that kind of stuff. Whereas if they're being challenged by a 30 or 40-year-old female cop who's kind of taking like a maternalistic role to them, where they're still chiding them, a lot of dudes won't throw down with a 30-year-old or 40-year-old woman. So as a result, you actually have this de-escalation effect just by having a female, because they're not going to punch a female in the face. And so that's actually like a valuable de-escalation tactic, to have a female who knows how to talk to people. So yeah, so I would say that not all of law, I would say 1% of law enforcement is wrestling and gunfights. 99% of law enforcement is knowing how to talk to people. So as long as the females know how to fucking talk to people, I don't give a shit. And there are 10,000 other improvements we could focus on when it comes to law enforcement, besides barring females from the profession or reducing females.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I care more about competency.
Yeah.
If, like, for example, I think, like, if somebody's unable to meet, like, physical fitness standards, they shouldn't be cops. It's that simple. Like, and I'll say that across the board. And
most cops can't run a 9-minute mile. I'll tell you that.
yeah,
Just
absolutely.
they. Sorry for interrupting when I ran it for
That's
5
fine.
minutes, but they, they wear a pistol on their hip. It grades into their hip. They wear soft armor for 50 to 60 hours a week. It fucks up their shoulders and their back. They sit in a patrol car for way too long. It fucks up their lower back. And then they're not required to do defensive tactics or physical training in a regular interval as a part of the job. And so as a result, they're at pretty much as soon as they're out of the academy, their level of fitness is whatever they physically do on the job. And if most cops do not work out outside of the job.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I picked this topic, because you've actually done it. It's easy for me to talk about it when I've never actually done this job, but like I did the Army, but that's different. Like, because like there are.
Well, and what does the Army do? And what does the Marine Corps do? They do ongoing physical training, ongoing defensive tactics.
Yep. And they probably don't do that as much in the police force. I have no idea. But it's just like...
No, they don't. They absolutely don't. Most law enforcement agencies do not have ongoing defensive tactics and ongoing physical training.
Yeah, that could definitely be a problem. Like, that's my issue. Is just like, I'd much rather a police force be competent. That's my biggest thing. Competency is such a key factor, essentially, because I respect law enforcement, but it's just, I watch channels like Audit the Audit, where I see cops that just give other police officers a bad name. But then I also see them actually review cops that are actually good, they're professional, they're cordial, they don't let their ego get the better of them, That's the kind of stuff I like to look for in a police force. Now, I understand that mankind, in general, we're human beings. We make mistakes. We're not going to be perfect, right? Sometimes our emotions get the better of us. It doesn't matter what gender it might be. But the thing is, like, that's where, like, you talked about it earlier, like, the level of professionalism that you might have. You've had people screaming at you and saying things like that, and you're like, oh, man, this motherfucker. So, like, I wish I wasn't, you're like, I wish right now, but, you got to keep it together, right? I get that. I completely understand that. And it's just, but that's the thing. It's like, you do this job because you're expected, there's something that's expected of you, and that's what I care about. Now, when people say, oh, well, women shouldn't be cops, I'm like, well, why not? Oh, because, women aren't as strong as men. Okay, listen, you could train any woman to be able to take down any kind of guy. It's all about the training that they take and whether they retain that training and if they consistently train up to this point. You could train anybody to basically take down, like, a 115-pound woman can, in fact, take down a 235-pound man. It's all about the training. Technique will usually, like, 9 times out of 10, will usually take down, strength. It's all about how you do it. Like, that's what I noticed, because I've seen bouncers take on guys twice their size. Maybe, yeah, because this person is drunk, but then they're not going to feel the punch, essentially. They're just going to get choked out, essentially. That's my whole entire point. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, but there is a certain level of aptitude, and so that's where even the female. So I mentioned the female cop that I liked, who is competent, who did physical training and took marksmanship seriously. There's a certain level of, like, base aptitude that I think that you're going to find more in males than you are in females. Some females are just going to get fucking rocked a couple of times where they get fucking punched in the face or whatever, and they're going to want to quit. And you could call that socialization, you could call that temperament, you can call that whatever you want to call that. However, if the females who do get rocked in the face and they're like, okay, I'm ready for seconds. And they push past it and they're ready to train, they're ready to grapple, they're ready to do whatever. And by the way, this is part of the reason why we got firearms, right? Like, I think that cops are a little bit over reliant on pepper spray and tasers. I think they need to be more comfortable grappling and wrestling and all that kind of stuff. But this is why, the military in particular, like I did a little bit of martial arts while I was in, and I did some martial arts since. And basically that's why we learn pressure points. That's why we learn locks. That's why we learn, basically like physiology, like how you actually direct the elbow and the wrist in order to be able to gain compliance from somebody who's stronger than you. There are cops who have talked to me about how they fought people high on drugs and they couldn't win. And I fought a dude who was high on meth and acid, and I didn't win because I was stronger. I won because I knew where to put pressure in order to get him into handcuffs, and I also won because I knew how to talk to him to try to get him in handcuffs in the first place. That's why I won. So it wasn't because I was stronger, it's because I was smarter and I was better trained. And so, yeah, can you do that with females? Absolutely. I think the main thing, though, what's gonna separate, not separate us specifically, but what's gonna separate like the propagandists who are gonna say like, oh, a woman can do anything a man can do. I'm more worried about what's in their brain and what's in their heart, because again, if you get punched in the face at 100% and your instinct is to quit, then that's the kind of thing that can get you killed if you don't train out of that instinct. If your instinct is to get hit in the face at 100% and go, that sucked, but I'm ready for round two, then you're the kind of person that I think can be developed into a decent law enforcement officer or military personnel.
Certainly.
You got to have that.
Absolutely. Because, like, it's not an easy job. Being a cop, I have no doubt about that. Like, it's, there's like a thing of like where people have a certain opinion about the cops. Like, I'll always respect law enforcement. I just feel like there's a lot of cops out there that get the most press, honestly. And they're the ones that give police officers a bad name. That's why I'm kind of like wary. Like, granted, I'm not.
Well, and as you should be. It's like the rule of thirds, basically.
Mhm.
So every job that you've probably ever been a part of, and I've ever been a part of, a third of them have been the most phenomenal people you've ever met in your entire life. A third of them have been absolutely mediocre, and a third of them have been total shitbags. And unfortunately, that also applies to law enforcement. And in law enforcement, the stakes are insanely high. And that's why when you see massive fuck ups, it's actually horrible, because you're not talking about like burning a meal at a restaurant. You're talking about accidentally killing somebody, or killing somebody through negligence.
Absolutely. When it comes down to like what Nashville did, like as far as their fitness test, essentially, do you think that's like actually a good way to evaluate how good somebody is, like physically?
No, I would probably do something more akin to like like combat fitness test, basically, where you do, the chain link fence climb is important because that's a part of the job. The buddy drag is important because that's a part of the job. The 500-yard run is important, but honestly, I think your cardiovascular fitness should have like it should have a stress test like a sprint, but it should also have a stress test like an endurance, like a 1 mile or 2 mile run, and you should be able to do that. Like let's say that you want to qualify, quote unquote. I think you should be able to get like under 9 minutes and 30 seconds, right? Which, by the way, is being like really generous. That's like kind of like, you're trotting, or you're running and then you're quitting halfway and then you start running again. It's really generous. But like those are the kinds of things that you need. But again, 99% of the job isn't gunfights, and 99% of the job isn't fighting. So.
No, absolutely. And,
So you need to pass that minimum standard to know that you can handle yourself in an emergency situation.
absolutely, because like normally most cops, they're just like driving around cars, stuff like that, and like very rarely, like if we're watching like cool episodes of Cops, they're usually just like having de-escalation techniques, like, "Hey, Bill, I understand that you have a domestic dispute with Susan over here, so you probably shouldn't be doing stuff like that, but I gotta take you in," kind of deal. But like, it's usually like you'll see situations where like cops will actually have to pursue somebody. Like that might be a cool action episode essentially. But that's why like it's good to bring stuff like this up, because it's good for like that they're doing this like as a test. But the problem is like, do they, like when you were a cop, did they actually have, hey, you need to do this test again to kind of like show your physical fitness essentially, or did they kind of like, never mind, don't worry about that?
Well, so I went to a really good academy, and it's Valencia. So the Valencia Criminal Justice Institute. I went there, and it was phenomenal. But they actually had a pretty hardcore staff, and so what they said is that they were going to do double the state requirements, and we were going to do physical training and defensive tactics the entire time. And if you didn't like that, then you could buzz off. Now,
Mhm.
what that ended up being was like 2 hours of physical training and like 1 hours of defensive tactics for the first week, or for the first 2 weeks or whatever, and then it ended up being 1 hour physical training, 1 hour of defensive tactics, and then sometimes we would just have straight PT days. And what was interesting to me was I actually found it kind of comparable to Marine Corps boot camp, because in Marine Corps boot camp, what happened is you just got smoked all day, every day. You just psychologically were just getting screwed with all the time, and you did physical training all the time. But they broke it up into like bursts of like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever. And then they would just do those bursts throughout the day, half dozen times. What was interesting about the having the 2 to 3 hours of PTDT at the end of the day was you would do like 2 to 3 hours or whatever when you've worked out for 90 minutes already and you know you got 90 minutes left or whatever. Or even if you do like an hour of PT and then you're like, oh, thank God we can move into defensive tactics, we can cool down. And then somebody pissed off the cop trainer, so the cop trainer was like, psych, joke's on you bitches, it's still PT, keep going. That's the kind of shit that can kind of fuck with your head and push your limits and let you know who you are, and see if you can find the iron within in order to continue. So they did a phenomenal job, but I know that 20 minutes up the road there's a certificate factory,
Mhm.
right? And so my cert is worth the same as their cert, even though they didn't get pushed the same ways I got pushed. So yeah, so it's the quality is all over the place.
But what I mean by that is like after you like go through the academy, like once you're done, and then now you're
Oh, they
back
don't
out
give
of
a shit.
this. They don't give a shit. Okay.
No, not at all. Like I probably could have answered that a lot faster, but but basically, like as soon as you're on the road, the road is the only thing that matters. Are there enough patrolmen? Do we have enough to cover the shift? Are you backing your guys? Are you humping your calls? Are you doing your reports? That's all that anybody matters. And when you're doing 12-hour shifts or whatever, um, nobody's going to expect you to get done with a 12-hour shift with a 30-minute or hour-long commute and to dedicate another hour of your day to working out. And then the truth is, you're so mentally and emotionally exhausted from the job, and also like cops don't get paid a lot, so they work a lot of OT. So the way that it worked for me was I worked 60 hours a week one week as a law enforcement officer on patrol, and I worked 24 hours a week the next week. Now, that second week, theoretically, if I was making a decent wage, I could just take that time off, relax, work out, whatever. But because cops don't make a decent wage, they work overtime all the time. And they make a decent wage by working overtime all the time. But what happens is you don't have an opportunity to really work out. And then you're also just emotionally recovering from the fucked up shit of the job. So, yeah, so no, nobody gives a shit about it.
Do you think that maybe like police officers, like police person should probably put more emphasis on it, or is it not that important to be physically fit or something?
No, they should. Literally, a third of cops every year they die in accidents. A third of cops every year die from cardiovascular incidents like heart attacks and strokes, and a third of them die from gunfighting. And I would say that physical fitness actually impacts all three. So the cardio, obviously, you can be healthier for longer. The accidents, if you're not paying attention because you're tired or overworked or whatever, that's going to contribute to car accidents. And then if you're not paying attention or you're tired or you're physically unfit and you get into a gunfight and you get shot, that's obviously going to impact you as well. So yeah, I would say fitness and caring about the fitness of officers would affect all three of these 100%.
Certainly. Before we move on to the last topic, so when I laid out like what the Nashville PD was doing, like as far as like the chain link climb fence or stuff like that, uh, if you had it your way, if you were the chief of police of your district, what would you say is like the most important parts of like physical fitness? Like what events would you actually want to gauge? And if you let's say you could maintain, okay, all my police officers every year are going to take this physical fitness test. This is what you're going to do every year. What kind of an event would that look like essentially for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I would probably keep it kind of classic, if a little light for the law enforcement officers, because I know that like they're gonna have to live their lives besides that. But I would say, I know this is gonna sound really pussy to all the military people, but I would literally say like 20 push-ups, 2 mile run in under 20 minutes, and then the probably like a 500-yard sprint or something like that in whatever a reasonable amount of time would be for a sprint for a like imagine your dad, right? Like imagine your dad when he was 40, okay? What would you expect him to be physically capable of doing when he was 45? Now, if your dad hold on, let me redo this. My dad in his 40s could probably still beat my ass, right? Now, he might
Sure.
not be able to outrun me, but he could beat my ass, right? And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that law enforcement officers are healthy enough that they can chase you for about a mile in their equipment so they can get three of their friends using radios to chase you down.
Hmm.
And then we need to make sure that if they get into a fist fight, they don't get their shit totally fucking rocked by a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
So I would say 20 push-ups, 2 mile run, 500-yard sprint, and then drive. That's important as well, just because you might have to carry an incapacitated person out of a dangerous scenario. So yeah, I keep it simple.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I think it's important for something like that, especially like because it might be easy, like your adrenaline's running and you like gotta pick somebody up like to carry them out of a situation, but like you run out of adrenaline really, really, really quickly though. So I think something like that would be actually a
Well,
very,
and you don't
very
want to have and you don't want to have a heart attack while while you're carrying somebody and while you're doing adrenaline. Like adrenaline is like a very very cardiovascularly intensive
oh
substance.
sure.
I went into a foot pursuit with an armed felon, and I could feel my blood pressure through the fucking roof during the chase.
Hmm.
And then the day after I was fine, the day after I was fine, and then 2 days later, it really hit me how dangerous that situation was, and I couldn't like my brain was locked into that situation for like days, like 2 days. And I had the EMTs do my blood pressure, just to check out what it was, and I was at like 160 over 109, and I was
Wow.
doing nothing. I was standing still. And it's just because my body was still in the chase. And
Insane.
so, yeah. And so for me, it's like I could do that. I was late 20s, right? So even though I smoked cigarettes, I ate trash food, whatever, it didn't literally kill me. But if I was 50 and I had 20 or 30 years on the job and my arteries were filled with Chipotle and I hadn't worked out in fucking 20 years, that shit can kill you.
Certainly. Absolutely. Yeah. That's why like I want to kind of like because you have a perspective that I don't have. You've been a law enforcement officer, so that's kind of like why I like want to kind of go into this because like is this do you think this like the standards they've had like of increasing their force with women by 30%, is it going to affect them? Is it going to be a good thing, bad thing? I mean,
Honestly, it just depends on how tough their beat is. I wouldn't do this in like South Central Los Angeles or fucking West Side of Baltimore. I don't think
mhm.
prioritizing female officers in tough neighborhoods is like a massive priority. That being said, if they have like a decent community and they care more about community service stuff and all that kind of stuff, it could change the culture in a positive way that actually ends up impacting the community better. And then also, there's something to be said for instance, like West Side of Baltimore, female hiring wouldn't be a huge priority of mine. But the truth is, if if we had people who were more empathetic, cared about the community, talked in kind of like an empathetic way, all that kind of stuff, and they actually started like putting not just community oriented policing where you only care about getting arrests by building connections with the community, but you actually cared about like improving the material situation of the community to the point that people started committing less crimes, maybe females would be more interested in doing that, whereas like tactical male hardcore run and gun cops, they might like the excitement more than they want to fix the community. So yeah, so wouldn't be a huge priority for me. I could get a couple of people killed, but to be honest, it's going to be there are way more stupid and dangerous shit that we're doing as a nation when it comes to law enforcement that gets way more people killed than hiring females.
Understood. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate your insight on this topic. I felt like this was more your wheelhouse than mine, but that's kind of like why I want to talk about it as well.
Sure. No,
All right.
absolutely.
So, what's your final topic for the evening?
Final topic. So I'm gonna force you to do this, even though it's dead now. But I just think it's really funny. So I'm gonna force you to do it. So the content creator Vosh, right? He's far lefty or whatever. Are you familiar with Mr. Vosh?
Oh yeah, I've seen some of Vosh's content. I still watch some of his videos from time to time.
Okay, so Mr. Vosh got in trouble probably about a month and a half ago now for having lolicon pornography on his hard drive and revealing that to the world. Now, the reason why a lot of people are upset is because lolicon is like depictions of people who are under the age of 18. Some of those images were of horses engaging with people who were under the age of 18. I would say, if I had to guess, because I did some research into the issue, that it was probably 13 to 18. Um, how I have some takes about how leftists and socialists and communists spend their time. I would actually just like to hear kind of like, how do you think this affects because he's going to be canvassing in New York as a part of like Progressive
I
Victory.
heard about that.
So, yeah, so how do you think this affects the online political realm, the real world realm? Should we care about the pornographic consumption habits of our political alternative media punditry? Is it overblown? Is it underblown? Should he be canceled forever? Like, I'd just be curious to pick your brain on that.
Well, for starters, I think lolly is really degenerative, honestly, because like the reason why I say that is because looking into it, I'm like, what the fuck is lolly? And when I found out, it's like, say for example, you've got a character that's like 1,000 years old, but they have like the body of like a 12-year-old, and people are like drawn to that. Like that's what they're like. They are. Oh yes, definitely. I would.
Thankfully, there was no prepubescent characters
Yep.
depicted.
Yep.
So they're small graces.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, I consider it like weird, and the fact that people are like, oh yeah, I'm okay with that. Or like, okay, so you're saying that you're okay with this, but you're not okay with that. I find that hard to believe, because then like, oh, that's just lolly. Never mind. Now, do I think he's gonna be canceled? In some circles, yes. Some people are like, okay, this is a bridge too far. But I think because Vosh is a very competent content creator, people are going to be so starstruck by him that there's like, well, these are fictional characters. It's not that big of a deal, honestly. I think it's cringe as hell, honestly, in my personal opinion. There are some things even I find beyond the pale. Now, I'm the kind of person where like, if people consume porn, it's not that big of a deal, okay? I don't care. The only time I have a problem with like with porn is if the parties are non-consenting. For example, if you've got a person that shoots porn, he or she is an actor or an actress, and they're forced to do it, that's where I have the problem. But if they're doing it of their own volition, like OnlyFans, they do it because they have true autonomy over their body, I don't care. But like, some things I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, that's a bit much for me. I'm a little bit, okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't go with that. But I don't think it's going to affect
No,
Josh
I
too
don't.
much.
Yeah, so I don't, and we don't have to belabor it too much. So people were a little frustrated with me because I was picking on a different content creator who had openly been supportive
Food
of the
shops.
content. Yep. And then I didn't. Anyways, but basically they've been openly supportive of the content, and then I got upset with Chad Logic because he wasn't more verbose in his condemnation. Like he basically he did some coverage, and I felt like it was pretty like weak, where he was like, oh well, like I'm not gonna judge you if you engage with their content or whatever, but I think it's fucked up, I think it's degenerate, whatever. And I said that he was pulling his punches because he didn't want to piss off his audience, because my personal impression is that there are some sexual degenerates left over in Chud Nation from his friendship with Mr. Girl. And like, that's not like an indictment of anybody. Like, I think I'm still friendly with Mr. Girl at this point. But I just think that there are people who uses Mr. Girl's controversy and arguments and perspectives in order to justify their own malignant taste. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there were people like that in Chud Nation. So Chud took issue with that. He didn't like that I was calling his audience a bunch of degenerate pedophiles.
Well, fuck
And
him. Fuck him,
Well,
honestly.
no, I
Yeah.
love Chud. So,
Yeah.
but at the
Well,
same
no, no,
time,
I
like,
like Judd too. So
but I felt the way that I felt.
yeah.
And then people were mad that I didn't get as upset about Fosh. But from my perspective, the entire world basically took like a huge shit on the guy. And then on top of that, like Chud's coverage was beautiful. It was perfect. It was like the
Hmm.
perfect level of criticism. He articulated all the ideas well, all that kind of stuff. Why would I be upset? I wasn't upset.
Hmm.
People pointed to that. Anyways, I'm ranting, but people pointed
No,
to
go
that
for
as
it.
like a sense of hypocrisy. But for me, it's not. It's like, don't do that shit. And not only don't do that shit, don't make it neutral. It's bad for you. It's bad for whoever drew it. You shouldn't be staring at 13-year-old to 17-year-old girls, especially if you're not 13 or you're not 17, right? So
No, 100%.
that content shouldn't be created, and adults should not be consuming it. Then on top of that, I think where I get like really uncomfortable is I think that it speaks to a stunted emotional development of the person who's consuming the content. Because if you're 25 or 30 and you're intentionally going out of your way to look at teenagers, for me, the worst argument is that you're just attracted to that thing and you can't help yourself, so you're compelled to do it. That's the worst part of it. The less bad argument, but I still view as incredibly bad, is that maybe you didn't develop as a teenager, maybe you didn't mature as an adult, and so you still like pine for the days in which you were a young person, and then therefore you go back to that time. But if you're 20, 24, 26, 27, 30, whatever, grow the fuck up. Okay? Find people who are in your peer group. Get your shit together. Start working out. Drink water. Get a decent job. Start paying your bills. Look for a partner who's of age and mature and intelligent. You spending your time in degenerate, disgusting fantasies is time wasted in which you could be becoming a better person. And so that's like my steel man. That's like my nice answer for somebody who's consuming that content. My mean answer is a little bit more aggressive, I'll say.
No, no, you're 100% correct though, because like I look at, I understand that there's like, you could say like it's a chemical imbalance. You could say like maybe they just didn't grow maturely, essentially, or maybe some people just like have a power trip. They feel like, well, I couldn't get these girls when I was their age, but maybe because I've been there, maybe I can manipulate them a little bit more. It's like a power move essentially for them. Like I can do whatever I want. Like they want to be bad. They want to rebel against their parents. They want alcohol. I can provide that kind of stuff. Like some people kind of look for those opportunities because they're predators, essentially. That's the way I look at
Or
them.
even if they're even if we're not talking about like real
Yeah.
girls or whatever, if you're fantasizing about that, then
Mhm.
you're kind of fucked in the head.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. That's why I consider it like degenerative, honestly. And if
Mm.
people say, oh, you have, yeah, I do have an issue. I'm sorry. It's like, I consider it an issue because like I don't consider it normal behavior. Okay,
Mm.
that's all there is to it. And as somebody that like I you brought up Mr. Girl, I can't fucking stand Mr. Girl. He's one person I would. Anytime I see him pop in a Discord server I'm on, I leave right away because it's not going to go well. I have got nothing. I don't have anything nice to say to him, and I've made that abundantly clear to multiple people essentially. But like,
Well, let me ask you this. So
sure,
when there's like stated morality, and then there's people who fail morality, and they're like their stated moral thing, and that's kind of why I guess I like the right in some respects, because we have this stated ideal of like have a good family, be loyal to your partner,
sure,
raise good kids, pay your taxes, work hard, pursue your ambitions, and all that kind of stuff. And you can point to all of the failures of conservatives to live up to these stated ideals.
sure,
But oftentimes I find that when it comes to liberals, people who are, they ingest liberal philosophy, or progressives, people who like lean more left and want to build a more equal and just society, oftentimes they don't have a moral answer to quote unquote degenerate or degenerative behavior. They're just like, well, if it's not harming anyone, then I don't want to put myself in the position to judge that person. Therefore, I think that's at lolicon being a neutral act is because technically, since the artist isn't hurting themselves, even though I would argue they're hurting themselves because they're generating the content, and the person who's consuming the content isn't hurting themselves because hurting anybody else, I guess they might be hurting themselves. That it's within the realm of like liberal or progressive tolerance. And so, how do you feel about like your philosophy kind of being used as an excuse to excuse bad behavior?
I kind of see like where it going in regards to that, but it's just like in a world like that, right? For example, if we're talking about lollies, and it's like, well, it's not harming anybody if they see stuff like this, you know. And it's like, why should we worry about stuff like that? I kind of think of the same thing as like people that get the same rush of like watching, like, let's say, for example, animations of people committing horrific sexual acts, maybe, and they kind of get a sexual thrill from that. It starts somewhere, essentially. And then, like, you've also got like people that are committing like homicidal acts or genocidal acts, and like they kind of get a rush from that, essentially. Now, granted, they might be there's like varying degrees, and I think each and every situation has to be take on a case by case basis, essentially. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because, like, if they feel like a certain sexual attraction, essentially, towards somebody that, like, let's say, for example, there's somebody that looks like a 16-year-old, but they're 1,000 years old. That means they probably have the sexual attraction towards somebody that actually is that age, essentially. The attraction is there. That's kind of like why, you know, Chris Hansen does his, catch a predator. He finds somebody that could fit the profile of somebody that looks like 13 or 14 years old, because that's what some people are attracted to, essentially. It starts somewhere, essentially. Now, people could say, oh, well, that's entrapment. I don't give a shit. I don't fucking care, okay? My feelings go out the door when the people show up at that door. That person is a predator as far as I'm concerned. And that's why,
Well,
like...
and to articulate it, like so let's say that somebody was like aesthetically into like a younger looking person or whatever.
Sure.
But I don't think that that would be the primary objection. The primary objection would be the fact that they're trying to take advantage of somebody who actually
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
physically immature, emotionally immature,
Yes.
mentally immature, capable of being plied with alcohol or drugs or abusive dynamics or like abusive family dynamics in order to
Yes.
gain sexual gratification, like all that kind of stuff. So it's it's the power, lefties talk about the power balance or whatever. So that's what it is. And then I think that having harder rules around like young people is fine. Like a lot of people also act like 18 years old and 1 day old is like you can do whatever you want. And like I don't think that's true at all. I think that if you had an 18-year-old who was like abused, mentally and emotionally immature, poor, came from the wrong family, wrong side of the tracks. And I think that if you're like a 50-year-old dude who's like, you got some money to spare, and then you swoop in on 18 days and, 18 years and 1 day old, and you're like, hey, I'll give you money and time and attention, and I'll buy you whatever you want as long as you do X, Y, and Z for me, I would still view that dynamic as abusive, even if it was legal.
No, sure, absolutely. Like, I can see that point of view. Like, okay, here's like a little hypothetical. Let's say, for example, you've got like a 20-year-old woman. She's shopping at the grocery store, and she sees a guy that like is in his 60s or something like that, and like they hit it off, and she finds him to be like a very genuine person. It might be weird. It might be kind of creepy for all of us, but like I would say like the only time I'd have a
If
problem with
she's
it,
getting older and if
yeah,
she's making an adult
yeah,
decision, then I
yeah,
think that
yeah,
that's kind of like the when people become themselves and are
sure,
mature enough to start making those decisions, and
sure,
then they're making educated and informed decisions about how they want to spend their time and their money,
right,
eventually it becomes no skin off of my ass. Like,
of
dude,
course,
if you're not actually like mental and you're like 25 or whatever, at that point do whatever the fuck you want because it's not
sure,
my fucking problem.
yeah,
Oh, very cute. But then again, like let's say that somebody's 25, same example, but then they're mentally disabled or they were emotionally abused or whatever, and then you're taking advantage of that situation.
sure,
Again, could potentially be legal. I still think that you're a fucking piece of shit and
yeah,
deserving of like social scorn. And so again, that's why with like bringing it back to lolly, which like could be people will excuse as fantasy. Well, so what part of the fantastic element is attractive to you? Is it the youth? Is it the naivete? Is it the whatever? And so as a result, like if you're an adult who, let's face it, I think that adults older than 25 should be trying to develop whatever their legacy on this planet is and having their significant other involved in their life, whether or not they're gay, straight, whatever. So if you're spending your time fantasizing about, taking advantage of like a naive, basically child person, even in your fantasy, I would still think that you're a fucked up person.
Oh,
Bringing
absolutely.
it to Mr. Girl, that was one of the things that like him and I disagreed about. Was he was like, oh well, it's American to be able to say whatever you want or think whatever you want, and I'm like, yeah, like the First Amendment says that you have the right to free speech and freedom of conscience, and that's good because we want to protect dissident people who have controversial thoughts. However, that does not mean that I can't say that you fantasizing about fucked up shit isn't fucked up, right?
Yep.
Like if you get sexually turned on, different example, but let's say that you get sexually turned on by like torture porn, or you
Hmm.
get sexually turned on by like torture, or and like the more graphic the better, and the less consensual the better. Then
Yep.
I would say like, hey, there's something there that you need to fucking deal with,
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
criticizable.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. I mean, like the key word that kind of comes into there is like the consent portion is what's 100%. And like I consider like people 18 and above consent. Okay, yes, I'll fly with that. But below that, I can't fly with that. That's just my personal principle, essentially, and like that's just kind of like where I go with it. But there's
Well, yeah, and I think it's different if you have like a 16-year-old dating a 16-year-old, or or if let's say that you had a 15-year-old dating a 15-year-old, but their idea of a romantic getaway was going to the movies and holding hands and
yeah,
kissing each other once at the end of the night. Well, nobody gives a fuck about that, and
yeah,
nobody's calling somebody nobody's calling a 15-year-old person going on a date and giving another 15-year-old a peck
sure,
on the cheek as they like or even a normal kiss. Like nobody's calling them something fucked up. They're not fucked up. It's if you're fucking 25 or if you're 30 and you're trying to get in on that, you're fucked up.
yeah, absolutely. Like anytime I hear like say like age is nothing but a number, I'm like, yeah, but 15 to life is nothing but a prison sentence. Honestly, like, like
That's a good rebuttal. I
yeah,
like that.
it,
Age is
but like that's my whole entire point. Is like I just think like some guys that like they feel like it's easier for them to manipulate people that are younger because they're like they try to get involved with somebody like in their age group and they're like, oh, they're too serious. I want to find somebody I can manipulate, somebody that can like kind of like mold. But it's just it's so screwed up, honestly. Like there are people that have like just way batshit crazy ideas, and
well,
like
I think the
no,
sorry for
no,
interrupting,
no,
but
it's
I
fine.
feel like the for me this is like a philosophical consequence of like consequentialism.
Mhm.
And the reason why I bring that up is because I'm not fully versed on all these topics, but the way
Sure,
that I understand them is like deontology and virtue ethics is where you're isolating like what you believe down to you, and then figuring out like good and bad behavior. I'd have to Google deontology in order to make sure what I'm saying is accurate, but who gives a shit for now.
yeah,
Then when it comes to utilitarianism, it's like the balance of all the things that happen within a certain framework in order to maximize utility for everyone. So making sure that everybody ends up like more on the good than on the bad, which can have bad stuff. But then consequentialism for me is kind of like it leaves like a philosophical gap where it's like if a bear shits in the woods and nobody's around to see it, did a bear really shit in the woods? And so that's where consequentialism, that line of reasoning, to me, it's like I could see somebody who was like a philosophy head, a 10 head philosophy head, like Vosh, being like, well, if I consume lolicon and if I don't abuse teenagers and if I enjoy this privately, then does it really hurt anybody? And I could see him saying no and then engaging in the bad behavior. But we've obviously seen how disastrous this has been, where he's paying a large social and professional consequence for the leak.
yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I actually watched like where Wick actually covered this, where people felt like he was more charitable to Wick than he was to food shops, or somebody was more charitable to Wick, to Vosh than they were to food shops, essentially. And
Yeah,
I
they
feel,
were. That was me, Wick, and Brianna.
yeah,
They
that's what
kind
it
of
was.
objected to. Yeah, they were objecting to us being more forgiving.
I got my own issue with Brianna, but that's a long story. But
Another
so
night.
yeah, another night, yeah. But like, I feel like it was fair for people to say, "Oh, wait a second, why are you being so critical of food shops, but not towards Vosh?" I feel like it's the same because even though food shops acknowledges what they did was wrong, it doesn't make it okay. It's kind of like I shouldn't
See,
have
here's
robbed. Yep, good.
well, so here's the thing about that, and I'm happy to be proved wrong,
Sure.
like on clips or evidence, whatever. Happy to have people send me whatever. What I think within 48 hours of us having the stream, she went and did a panel debate, and during the panel debate, she was like, "Yeah, I'm a lowercase p word." And then also, I'm going to continue to consume it, and I don't see a problem with it. For me, that's like boom, like you're done.
I didn't
Like
know
if
that.
yeah, so if Vosh, let's say let's run the entire scenario.
Sure.
So what happened was Vosh got caught. He had a cope stream about it. He said he didn't know what was what. Then he did a prepared segment. He did all his philosophical explanations of all the times that he said edgy stuff in the past. You can believe him or not believe him if you want.
Hmm.
And then he also came up with a possible but not probable excuse, right? Let's just say I think that he probably consequentially rationalized it to himself and said if a bear shits in the woods and nobody's around to see it, did a bear really shit in the woods? And then as a result, he didn't care about his own consumptive habits and he got caught, right?
Hmm.
That's what probably happened. However, his public stance is still this is bad, shouldn't have done it. I don't condone it. I don't approve of it, whatever, and he hasn't said like I won't be doing it again, but bear in mind if he gets caught with this again, he's probably fucked, right?
Oh yeah.
I think anybody who gives him any amount of grace, if he gets caught doing it again, that grace evaporates. And so, for me, him, while genuinely or disingenuously, however you fucking view it, condemning the behavior, describing how he got where he got, saying I fucked up, and implied it's not going to happen again, is infinitely better than saying fuck you guys, Giga Chat, I'm going to do it again.
Hmm.
These are different behaviors.
Sure. What about like as far as food shops is concerned, though?
Well, with food shops, if she was like, you know what, I realize that it's bad for me. I shouldn't be fantasizing about this stuff. I should be focusing on more productive parts of my life. I should be doing X, Y, Z, A, B, C. I'm going to start drinking water. I'm going to start lifting weights. I'm going to start focusing on getting a good job. I'm going to focus on my relationships. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And also, I don't stand by this take anymore. I'm done with it. And I actually think that it's fucked up for me and fucked up for society. Then I'll be like, okay, like I'm not ecstatic about, like I'm not like enthusiastic for us to work together. But if we're on a panel together, I'm not going to instantly cancel the call,
Hmm.
right? Just because I see you. Whereas I think that if somebody says, "Hey, I'm having a panel on a politically neutral subject," let's say we're talking about Ukraine,
Hmm.
and then I see food shops on the added list, and then or let's say Vosh even,
Hmm.
and let's say that Vosh and or food shops have like a public pro lolly stance, I'll say, listen, I'm not interested in furthering this person's public career, and I'll decline.
Sure.
So
No,
yeah, because
I
because
get it.
because I don't want to promote it. Even if I'm not the most impactful promotion,
Mhm.
I don't want to promote it.
No, I get it. I mean, like, here's the thing. Like, there are people out there is like, you should bring this person on. I'm like, I'm not gonna bring that person on. If I feel like I don't want to bring that person on because I personally won't do it, I'm not gonna do it for clout reasons. I bring people on because I feel like I can have a good conversation. Like that's why I invited you on because like I know you and I are gonna have a good conversation regardless of what the topic is. It's gonna be not necessarily philosophical, but it's gonna be like we can kind of like even if we don't agree on something, we can have a discussion about it and be mature about these topics. Because I like having conversations like that we can take our emotions out of it. We approach it from a very pragmatic point of view. There are some people I will not bring on my platform because I know myself. I know who I am. There are certain people on, if I bring them on, I'm just going to just fucking just go nuclear on them because I think they're so terrible. But like, I don't know food shops enough to know whether I would or would not bring them on. Would I talk to Vosh? Probably. Not just because like I feel like him and I could probably have a discussion on some things. But like, if he was to bring this stuff up, I'd be like, okay, dude, listen, I'm not gonna touch that. That's not. I'm not okay with shit like that. But like, it's very hit and miss with people like that.
Well, what I would say, the other thing too is like there are other red lines for me, right? So
Sure.
if somebody was like they're like pro heroin or pro hard drugs,
Sure.
and they thought that they wanted to promote drug consumption for everybody. Like, it's one thing to have a philosophical conversation; it's another thing to have like a conversation with like an active addict that is also trying to encourage other people in their addiction. Or if somebody was like pro animal abuse, where they were just like, oh yeah, like animals, like they don't have souls, the Bible says so I like to throw gerbils in microwaves, like, for fun or whatever, because there's no real harm when I'm torturing an animal, whatever. Then I would be like, okay, I'm never fucking sharing a platform with this person. So there's obviously like other limits to who I will have a conversation with. And I think that's the difference. So yeah.
Well, there's people that'll bring on people like Mr. Girl because he is content gold. I'm not going to deny that. There's also people that are going to bring on people like Lav because she's content gold. I'm not going to bring them on.
Well, to be fair, Mr. Girl, while having an explicit song called, I am a PDF person, he has not been caught with pornography, that engages in that content. So I think that people, they're willing to play in the post-ironic soup of, is Mr. Girl really that bad? Is he not that bad? They're willing to play within that as long as there's a certain amount of deniability. Whereas I think, like, if you found out that he actually abused a child or if he engaged in that content, I think it becomes infinitely less possible that people would engage.
Oh, no, 100%. Like, he's a guy that, like, I remember, like, one of the first times I saw Mr. Girl, like, I was like, dude, you're a fucking creep. But then, like, I then sent him a message on Twitter. I was like, okay, now I see your point of view. I disagree with you, but I look at you in a different way. But I still don't like you, honestly. But, like, the thing is, it's like, he tiptoes the fine line. Yes, he hasn't been caught with any of these things. Honestly, do I think he has it? I'm not going to say that because I don't have any proof of this. But, like, the thing is, people bring him on because he is content gold. Like, they bring him on because the second you bring on people like Mr. Girl, people are going to flock to it because he brings controversy to it. And, that's fine. If people want to bring him on, go for it. Go for it. That is your content. Personally, me, I'm not going to do it. But again, like, I'm very, very selective. Would I bring somebody on if I feel like I can have a good discussion with them? Yes. Because, like, 2 or 3 weeks ago, Smith actually had a conversation with Mr. Girl. And then he went from talking to Mr. Girl to talking to me. And I was like, but, I felt like I could have a conversation with Smith, and it was a very good show. And he asked me, he's like, would you bring Mr. Girl on? I'm like, fuck no, I wouldn't bring him on. Like, I was very specific about that, so. But.
Well, actually, so, yeah, but we're kind of, I would say, probably wrapping the last topic. But so actually, let me ask that question. What was your red line with him that you didn't want to, like you were like, too far, not my vibe, whatever? Or is it just a vibes thing where you just think that the conversation would be impossible, so you wouldn't be able to get anything productive out of it?
My issue with Mr. Girl is that he feels like he knows people better than they know themselves. He feels like he knows better than everybody else about things. He thinks he's entirely too intelligent. Like, there was a thing with Stardust, where Stardust is going through a rough patch.
Where they're like predicting.
Yep.
Yeah, one of the most frustrating things conversationally is when I know what you're gonna say, and it's like, okay, well then you fucking say it, bitch. Yep. And then I'll say that, and then they'll be like, Nah, it's better if you say it. It's like you
Yep.
just wasted time
Well, it's not
by
just that.
pretending to be psychic, you asshole. Like fuck
Well,
you. Like
it's not just that, but it's just like Stardust was going through a rough patch. She didn't share with it, and he's like, Stardust, we're friends. You should tell me these things. I'm like, fuck you! I'm sorry. Like, I think he's really condescending. I think he's like one of those guys that's like, I'm smarter than you, and I know it. I'm like, dude, no. And like, it's not just the creep factor that I get from him, but it's just like, I hate people that hold themselves in a much higher position and they feel like I'm better than you and I know it when they clearly aren't. Like I get Deuce Chill vibes from people like that, not just Mr. Girl.
yeah, see, that's why you gotta join the Marine Corps. That way, you know, like institutionally, constitutionally, that you're fucking retarded. Like you're awesome, but you're retarded, and therefore you have the ego to go do whatever you want to do, but you also have the humility to realize that at the end of the day, you're kind of an idiot.
If Mr. Girl joined any of the branch of the military, that dude would have gotten kicked the fuck out, though. Honestly, like
Yeah. Maybe the Air Force. He would have made it through 6 months of the Air Force.
maybe depends on what flight he was put in through. So, but but yeah. So before we close up shop, was there anything you want to kind of like talk about? Like, if you had any questions for me?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So just sharing, just because there are some whales who swim in our ocean, okay, and
Sure.
they're kind of selective with when they drop their time, money, and attention. So I just want to share on the things that I'm working on. So obviously, Counterpoints 40K is my bread and butter. Breaking down the Warhammer 40K universe is kind of like the main thing that I've been doing. That's been algorithmically good to me. Also, I've been thinking about expanding because Warhammer doesn't have enough content for me to consistently break down. I've had to go revisit some older stuff. So I'm thinking about expanding that. So what I've done is I did a lore video that combines like 12 different science fiction universes into a coherent timeline. That way I can open up the amount of things that I'm breaking down. And so if that's like the kind of thing that you're into sci-fi, you're into, kind of like mixing and matching and combining worlds and all that kind of stuff, then obviously check that out when it comes out. And then the other project that I'm working on that's been really nice to me, even though it's a YouTube short, which isn't, the most lucrative metrically, but it's still doing good numbers, is I'm designing 3D printed shells for real weapons in order to build science fiction weapons. So I started with the bolter. I bought a Rock Island VRF-14. It's a 12 gauge semi-automatic magazine fed 12 gauge shotgun. 12 gauge is 72 caliber. So bolters in the Warhammer 40K universe are 75 caliber. So I 3D printed a case around it in order to make it look like a bolter. And I'm on the tail end of perfecting it.
So cool.
I also have a chainsaw sword that I'm working on. I have a bolt pistol that I'm working on. And then I'm going to work on the Warhammer 40K flamer. I actually found a flamethrower kit that works really well. And I'm going to have like a screw-on, kind of like the flamer from the universe. If you've ever seen one, they have screw-on gasoline packs. I'm going to do that. I'm going to make it aesthetically look like the Warhammer 40K flamer. When I'm done with that, I'll move into Halo. I'll move into Aliens. So if you have a lot of money, and you like science fiction weapons, and you want the weapons to be functional, then you can throw it my way so I can develop the products, or you can wait till I'm done developing the products and then you can buy them.
That's that, and like every time I see that video on Twitter or X or something like that, it's like that's so fucking cool. Like I got firearms myself, and being somebody that's like still newish to the 40K universe and the lore, it's so cool to see stuff like that because
well, I'm shooting slugs, but there's something called a frag 12 round, and it's a explosive 12 gauge grenade round.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have a rocket, but it's very close to the lore.
Yeah. It's cool though. Like you can't deny how cool that shit actually is. Like I respect things that blow up. Let's put it that way. I'm an artilleryman by trade, so
yeah. So anything that goes boom is good.
Oh, 100%. But yeah,
and sorry, continue.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so even one of the ideas that I want to do too, so obviously like getting a plasma sword or like a power sword from Halo is impossible, right? Like we don't have the technology. But who's to say that you couldn't make like a just like a 3 foot, little double bladed T handled or
Yeah,
I handled, double blade. And then also just Googling around, I saw that somebody they put a plasma coil or something at the bottom of a handle. Then they put a fan, and then what it does is it sends up an electric arc between the two blades, and then it'll actually heat up enough that it'll do kind of like a purple orangey flame between the two.
that
Now,
is dope.
obviously, that's not. Yeah, obviously that's not accurate to what like people want. But if somebody was like, "Yeah, I'll buy the steel and aluminum composite frame plasma sword painted blue so I can hang it on my wall," or if they were like, "Hey, can you figure out how to put plasma between the blades? That way it's still an energy sword, even though it's not an energy sword from the video game." Like, fuck yeah, I would absolutely spend weeks or months perfecting the design and then sell you the final model. So yeah, and if I can do that and then turn it into good content that does algorithmically well, then that's what I'm going to be pushing for.
Oh, absolutely. And like, what's funny about that is like, I remember there were some guys that actually did an experiment where they could actually create a lightsaber. It was basically like a giant blowtorch. They could just like blow like a
Yeah,
flame
it was
that's
like
like
a
this
4 foot
tall.
blowtorch at like 2,000 degrees. Yeah, I saw that. That thing's awesome.
That is so cool. But like, the only thing is like, if I was ever actually to see is like, hey man, could you create this? It's like some of the weapons from like my favorite game series of all time is the Mass Effect series. I'm a huge Mass Effect fiend. I love shit like that. So, but like,
Oh, there's a YouTube channel called Impact Props, and they've been working with everybody who has done Halo weapons. So there's another guy named Dwai, and he took the Keltec RDB, which is like the cheapest commercially available or civilian available bullpup on the market,
sure.
and he made kits in order to make the battle rifle, the designated marksman rifle, and the assault rifle from Halo. So if you want a cosmetically Halo weapon, you can get one. I don't know if Dwight's selling them, but he at least has the designs for it, so you could piggyback off his designs. Or if you give me a year and you give me your YouTube subscription and you watch the videos and or buy a weapon, then you can back me, and in 2 years I'll have literally an arsenal of Halo weapons, Starship Troopers, aliens, Warhammer. And if you're, you're retired, I'm hoping you're getting some retirement money. You're a commercial trucker. I hope they pay you a living wage. And you're like, man, I really want the gun from Aliens hanging out on my house, and I want it to be functional. Then I'll have something for you next year.
Well, that would actually be pretty sweet, honestly, because like
Yeah,
I've got plenty of space on this wall to put stuff on there.
see,
So
let's fill it up with stuff that your wife will hate.
absolutely, absolutely. So, but anyway, so Connor, before I let you go, let everybody know where they can find you again, real quick, like all your socials and stuff.
Yeah, easiest way to do that, go to YouTube, type in Counterpoints 40K. So Counterpoints common spelling 40K is in kilo. You'll find my science fiction channel. Down in the description, you'll find my essay channel, which is neglected, but I'll get to it eventually, and then also my debate channel where I post content such as this. And then those are linked down in the description. And then also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, the easiest way is Counter Connor, COUNTERCONOR. You'll find me there as well. You'll find shit posts, science fiction stuff, and a few videos of me doing development on the Bolter.
Fantastic. So, are you actually going to do some like I know you tried doing hippy dippy stuff again, but are you going to try doing that again or?
I will when I go full time. So right now I'm at 65,000 subs. I think just to give insight into the channel, I do have VA disability. It's not as much money as I want, but it's a little bit of cash. It takes care of some bills. I'm working on improving that. And then I only got that recently. I only got that in the past few months. Then YouTube does get me around 1,500 a month. So basically, I'm like 1,500 to 2 grand short from going full time on a
Okay.
monthly basis. So if I hit 100K subs and that YouTube revenue starts to kind of like peak up to the point where I'm almost making it, then I'm going to go full time, live stream 20 to 30 hours a week, and I'm going to need to do content. So if I'm doing content and I need content, then yeah, booking a heated hippie once a week should be part of the menu to help revitalize Twitch and YouTube politics.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing stuff like that, and I'd love to actually be on. If you ever do Hippy Dippy, feel free to bring me on. I'm all about throwing down some days. So
Absolutely. So 2024, we're in development. 2025, we should be cooking.
I'll be here. So, but I hope you've actually had a good time here this time around, because I just hope you had a great time, and I always like bringing people like yourself on.
Of course. Next time I'll bring a 6-pack of Guinness. I shouldn't have forgot this. Next time my children will be older too, so hopefully they'll give me some more peace so I can actually pound a 6-pack of Guinness and not be in trouble. So
all right. Well, thanks again. Thanks so much, Connor, and I hope you have a great evening. And I hope everybody tunes in next weekend. So on the next time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Take care now.
all right. Good night.
Night.